Well, we have finally made it to the final stretch of Kingdom Come Deliverance. The closing hours of this game are filled to the brim with non-stop cutscenes, but there are still numerous drunken challenges to face. But before we get into that, why don't you subscribe so I don't have to hand you over to Prince Andrew. Now, our dear boy Henry has just drunkenly stumbled into the enemy camp where we can now officially meet the big bad villains. One bloke called Eric, who looks like he's aged by 15 years in the sequel, and we also meet the Tooth Fairy, the bloke who took Daddy's sword. Unfortunately, the Tooth Fairy recognises Henry and tells us the truth. Daddy number 1 is actually Daddy number 2, and Daddy number 1 is actually from the planet Goon World. The fact that Daddy number 2 is actually Daddy number 1 makes me have an aneurysm, and it also makes the head we received from him earlier rather suspicious. Henry then gets his meat beat for the next 12 hours straight, but not long after, we are saved by the grave-robbing scum Zebedee from the Magic Roundabout, before being insulted by Gabe Newell via the Steam achievements. Our boy Henry is now free and somehow still drunk. Here, Henry is advised not to go looking for his stuff since it is that dangerous, but we choose not to listen to that advice since our stuff has all of our beer. On our way to gather our beer, we run into one small obstacle. Now, since drunken naked Henry here sucks at sneaking, he alerted this guard when sneaking into Eric's office, leaving us with no choice but to fight. Now, Henry's fisting skills has come a long way thanks to all of his sexual encounters, but this was still a hard fight. Eventually though, we managed to pull off Henry's signature move, the corner fuck. After enough corner fucking, the guard went down on Henry, and we mercifully crunched his skull with our foot before picking a lock and taking back all of our beer. Since Henry is now fully kitted out, we can forego stealth entirely and just sprint through the enemy camp and jump through shit back into the outside world. It is here where we once again run into Zebedee, who we promised to reward thoroughly for his help in freeing us. Naturally, once we returned to Ratai and talked to Daddy, we told them the truth about Zebedee, the fact that he is a grave robber, a dog-threatening and a munter. But without his help, we wouldn't have made it all this way back, so we did reward him with the noose.
This is what I get for sticking out my neck for you. I'll kill you, you cunt!
Now that we are finally home and Daddy is all updated, it is now time to raid the bandits' fortress. Now, since there's no beer in this fortress, all we can do is charge through it as fast as humanly possible so we can get back to the important shit, such as drinking, shagging, drinking, and shagging. Unfortunately, the Tooth Fairy escaped to Talmberg Castle, capturing Daddy and Lady Stephanie. Our next objective is clear: drink as much as humanly possible and rescue the hostages' sausages. Our first attempt at rescuing the hostages' sausages was this night raid. Now, this night raid was a fucking disaster. For one, we couldn't even get up the ladder since this fella was so insistent on Henry's head going up his rectum, but after many reloads, I finally managed to climb the ladder and begin the raid, which also failed spectacularly. The failure of the night raid now means we have to lay siege. Our drunken lad Henry has now been given a task to locate a man who will help us build a trebuchet. Now, the guy we need is hauled up over in Sasau but won't leave for a few good reasons. The main one is because of some documents which we easily managed to forge, but the other reason requires a bit more finesse to tackle. There is a killer after Bob the Builder here and we have to put a stop to him. A man called Paycheck was apparently seen around Bob the Builder's house at this time, so I thought it was a good time for Henry to pay him a visit. Henry necked some wine for good luck and stormed into Paycheck's hotel room to have a nice conversation with the guy. Unfortunately, the conversation went south and Henry's blade found its way in his neck. At the same time, Paycheck's friend over here saw me talking nicely to him, so naturally, Henry just couldn't leave him as a witness. He had to die as well. After dealing with the witness, we come to another realisation. Turns out, the walls had ears, and now the guards knew about Henry's drunken antics and threw him in a jail cell for 10 more days. But that doesn't matter, since while in prison, Henry had made a deal with the guards to trade his services for more beer, making him drunker than ever. Now we are free once again, and we can bring Bob the Builder to build our trebuchet. Now we are finally getting towards the end of the game. We have to prepare for the siege by doing all these funky wonky little side objectives, such as getting meat for the camp. Unfortunately, there's not enough beer left in this whole game's map to satiate Henry for much longer, so we ignore all non-essential quests and just begin the siege as soon as the trebuchet is built. Now, this mission, the actual siege itself, was without a shadow of a doubt the hardest part of this challenge so far. Not just because combat is hard when you're too drunk to see where you're swinging your sword, but because for some fucking reason, the vast majority of my soldiers running into battle with me just decided to drop dead right at the start. They literally just died, leaving Henry with around 4 allies who sometimes decided to die too or just bug out randomly. Now, I don't know if this is because I didn't get these soldiers meat fast enough, but I think they're being a little bit dramatic. At the first part of this siege, there are 3 waves of enemies that we are supposed to help take out. But with everyone dying at the start and all these soldiers sprinting at Henry, we kept getting caught in a clinch and having to take it from all angles without any defence. Poor old Henry was truly getting pounded, and the only supporter we had left fighting at our side was Captain Bernard and this one random bloke who kept sprinting in circles. This part of the siege took an eternity. I truly thought I wasn't going to be able to complete it with how drunk Henry was getting and how little support he had. So after an hour of attempting and continuously dying, it was time to try a new approach. I decided to abandon the soldiers that Henry was fighting with and went to meet Loverboy Hans Capon in the main courtyard to fight off the main force. Now, somehow, we managed to win this fight in the main courtyard, but the soldiers would not stop screaming even after the fighting had stopped. With the main area secured, I now had to go back to the castle walls and help Bernard, who was still taking it from all angles. Unfortunately, Henry had too little health to engage in one-on-one combat, so we had to come up with yet another new plan. We robbed the dead. Unfortunately, this is the second time that Henry has ever wielded a bow in his life, so most of our shots were wasted and ended up hitting Bernard right up the crack. After we lost all of our arrows, Henry ended up getting chased down by the gank squad. Fortunately for Henry, a knight in shining armour turned up. Sir Hans Capon of Perkstein managed to break through the invisible wall holding him in place and sprinted into battle to valiantly defend his boyfriend, and Hans absolutely kicked their asses, saving Henry's life. With the numbers finally thinned, it was time for Henry to charge in and help Bernard with the final 2 enemies and win the siege. With the siege finally over, the Tooth Fairy freed Stephanie and Daddy, but he took our sword, and to make it worse, he took Henry's beer. Henry will not rest until the Tooth Fairy dies. Now, according to an ancient prophecy given to Henry by Poseidon, Henry must now travel to the Kuttenberg area, for they have the ultimate beer, the beer known as Starapramen. Not only do they have this magnificent beer, but apparently the Tooth Fairy may also be there. With this important information in mind, Henry hops on his horse with his boyfriend Hans and heads to the city of Kuttenberg, where our drunken journey will continue. But before we head off, we have to make one quick stop.
I'm sure you'll be
You didn't think I'd let this episode end without sex, would you? Thank you guys for watching, but we are not yet done. KCD1 was just the beginning, and I don't think I have enough footage to create another full movie yet, so just sit tight and the next video will be the start of KCD2, and I'll see you all very soon. That is a threat.